The room froze. You could almost hear the echo of her laughter bouncing off the marble walls, sharp and cruel, slicing through the air like broken glass. "Those shoes," the rich woman said, one perfectly arched brow lifting as her voice dripped with mockery. "Did you find them in the trash?" The laughter that followed wasn't just laughter, it was judgment. It was the sound of money laughing at struggle. Every eye in the room turned toward the young black girl standing near the corner, her small frame trembling beneath the weight of 100 stares. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest like a shield, her handmade shoes catching the light beneath the studio lamps. They weren't perfect, the stitching uneven, the leather soft from wear, but they were hers. Every thread told a story of survival, of late nights in a cramped apartment, of dreams too big for the small world she came from. The room smelled of perfume and money. Silk dresses brushed against polished floors. Cameras flashed. Assistants whispered. She wanted to disappear. Her face burned, her throat tight. But she didn't move. She stood there, frozen between shame and defiance, her heartbeat so loud it almost drowned out the fading laughter. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the photographers who had been clicking away now stared at her in quiet amusement, waiting for her to break, to run. But she didn't. Then quietly, her voice trembled into the silence. "One day," she whispered, her words shaking but steady enough to reach them all, "someone will wear my shoes, and you'll remember this moment." There was a brief pause and then more laughter. One of the models smirked. The designer, the same woman who'd mocked her, turned away with a dismissive flick of her hand. "Dreams are free, sweetheart," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "but talent costs." The words strung more than the laughter. The girl lowered her eyes, feeling the heat of humiliation crawl up her neck, but inside something small began to burn. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something quieter, a promise. When she left that day, she didn't cry. Not on the subway ride home, not when she passed the glittering stores on Fifth Avenue filled with shoes that cost more than her rent. She walked with her head down but her mind awake, every step echoing with the same words she had spoken in that room. "One day, someone will wear my shoes." The words looped in her mind like a heartbeat. Home was a one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of old paint and coffee. Her mother was asleep on the couch, exhausted from another double shift at the hospital. The girl tiptoed into her room, setting her sketchbook on the small wooden table by the window. She looked at her shoes again, tracing the stitches with her fingers. They were uneven, sure, but they were real. They were made with hands that had known struggle. She flipped open her sketchbook and began to draw, shoes that told stories. Shoes that looked like dreams stitched into leather. She worked through the night. The city outside never slept, and neither did her determination. Every line she drew was an act of resistance. Every stitch she imagined was a reply to that laughter. And when the first light of dawn spilled across her window, she whispered again, softly to herself, "They'll remember." Weeks passed, then months. She applied for internships at every design house she could find, most never replied. Some rejected her with polite, automated words. Still, she didn't stop. She began selling her handmade shoes online, posting photos on social media, tagging designers who would never notice. At first, no one cared, but one night, a local influencer stumbled upon her page. She bought a pair, then another. Slowly, people started to notice the imperfect beauty of her designs, the emotions stitched into every curve. Then came the call. A small independent fashion show downtown wanted her shoes for a feature. It was Paris or Milan, but it was something. When she arrived, she recognized the sound of clicking heels, the smell of hairspray, the chaos of models rushing. She didn't belong here, or so she thought, until she saw one of the models holding her shoes, looking at them like they were something rare. "These are beautiful," the model said. "Who made them?" The girl hesitated before replying. "I did." That night her shoes walked the runway, not on a celebrity, not on someone rich or famous, but on women who believed in something raw, something real. The audience clapped, some smiled, and in the front row sat a woman she didn't expect to see, the same designer who had mocked her months ago. She was silent now, her face unreadable. After the show, the girl walked backstage, her heart pounding. The designer approached her slowly. "Those shoes," she said, her voice different this time, lower, careful. "Where did you learn to make them?" The girl looked at her, her eyes steady. From the same place I learned to dream, she said, from nowhere. The designer's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. There was a long pause, the kind that carried all the weight of unspoken apologies. The next day, her picture was in the local paper. From the projects to the runway. The article called her a rising star of authentic design. Orders poured in, her inbox filled. And yet, even as success began to knock, she kept remembering that room, the laughter, the sneers, the sting of humiliation. It stayed with her not as pain, but as fuel. Months later, she was invited to showcase her collection at a major fashion event. The same glossy stage, the same flashing lights, the same woman in the front row, but this time it was her name printed on the banner above the runway. Her designs, her story, the crowd applauded, cameras flashed. And as her model stepped out wearing a pair of shoes, the same style she had once been mocked for, she saw the rich woman's face again. No mockery now, only silence. Their eyes met across the crowd. For a second, it felt like time folded in on itself. The laughter, the tears, the long nights, all leading to this. The girl, no longer a girl, smiled, just slightly, enough to say, "I told you so." When the show ended, reporters swarmed around her. She spoke humbly, her words simple. "These shoes were made from scraps," she said. "But sometimes that's how dreams start, from what's left over, from what the world throws away." The cameras loved it, but for her, it wasn't about fame. It was about memory. She thought of her mother asleep on the couch, of the quiet apartment, of the first sketch she ever drew. She thought of every no she had turned into a not yet. That night she walked home wearing her own shoes, the same ones that had once been mocked. They were still imperfect, still handmade, but now every step echoed differently, stronger, louder, a rhythm of survival. Because sometimes, the laughter that once tried to break you becomes the sound that reminds you, you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand out. The nights were the worst. That laughter, that cold, high-pitched laughter, kept echoing in her dreams like it had been stitched into her soul. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that white room again. The cameras, the glances, the smirk on Amelia Voss's face. "Did you find them in the trash?" The words had become ghosts, haunting every silence, every thought. Days turned into weeks, and still the humiliation replayed in her mind like a broken film reel. She'd wake up sweating, her hands clenched tight, as if she could squeeze the memory out of existence. But she couldn't. So she worked, harder than ever, 2 shifts at the diner, sometimes 3. Her hands smelled like grease and detergent, her feet sore from hours on tile floors. The city didn't care about her dreams. It only cared if you could pay rent. The nights were cold, the mornings colder, but between both, she found a strange kind of warmth in the rhythm of survival. After her shifts, she'd walk home through streets lit by dying lamps, the hum of traffic around her, the city's chaos whispering that dreams like hers didn't survive here. But she didn't listen. She'd sit by her small window, her fingers tracing new designs over old sketches, imagining shoes made not for wealth, but for meaning. Shoes that could tell stories. The leather she used came from thrift store jackets, the thread from dollar store spools. She saved every coin from her tips, every spare bill crumpled in her apron pocket. Sometimes she'd skip dinner to buy better material, convincing herself that hunger was just part of the process. Every stitch was an act of defiance. Every pair of shoes, a reminder that she was still here, still trying. Meanwhile, miles away in a penthouse wrapped in glass and gold, Amelia Voss was planning her new launch. Golden Vanity, the campaign read, all shimmer, no soul. Her face filled magazine covers, her name dripping from the lips of influencers like honey. To the world she was a queen, flawless, powerful, untouchable. She spoke about vision and artistry in interviews, as if she'd ever known what it meant to create something from struggle. Her perfume ads played on every screen in the diner where Maya worked, forcing her to listen to that voice again. Smooth, confident, fake. But success has a sound, and so does hunger. Maya's world was filled with the sound of coins dropping into a jar, the scrape of a pencil against paper, the hum of a sewing machine borrowed from a neighbor who believed in her just enough. She was building something quietly, something Amelia would never understand. When the announcement came about the open call for new designers, Maya almost didn't go. "They're just gonna laugh again," her friend from the diner said. "Those shows are for people with money, with names." But Maya only smiled, tired but stubborn. Maybe, but names start somewhere. She'd spent weeks perfecting her designs. The shoes were still made from scraps, but this time they looked like art, curves inspired by city skylines, colors drawn from faded murals and cracked walls. She'd found beauty in what the world threw away. The day of the audition, she stood outside the studio again. Same white walls, same marble floors, but something was different this time. The fear was still there, but so was fire. Her palms were sweaty as she held her shoebox close to her chest, waiting her turn. Around her, other designers flashed portfolios of glossy perfection, brands stamped on every piece, assistants buzzing with expensive coffee and confidence. Maya stood alone, wearing her own creation, the same shoes she had once been mocked for, now polished, refined, reborn. When her name was called, she stepped forward. Her heart thudded so loud it almost drowned out her thoughts. "Maya Thompson," she said softly, her voice echoing slightly in the large hall. She placed her shoes on the table in front of the judges, 4 of them, each with cold, practiced smiles. Cameras clicked. Notes were taken. No one looked at her at first. It felt like that same silence again, the one before the laughter. Then something shifted. One of the judges, an older man with kind eyes, leaned forward. His fingers brushed the edge of the shoe. He turned it over slowly, tracing the seams, the uneven stitch that wasn't a flaw but a story. "These," he murmured, his voice quiet, almost surprised, "these tell a story." The room stilled. For a second, Maya thought she had imagined it. But then she saw Amelia Voss, seated at the far end of the table, in her signature gold blazer, her hair perfectly smooth, her expression unreadable. Recognition flickered in her eyes, a flash of something between disbelief and irritation. Then came the smirk, that same smirk. "She's just copying street junk and calling it fashion," Amelia said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her voice was like perfume again, sweet on the surface, poison underneath. A few people chuckled softly. The old familiar sting rose in Maya's chest. But this time she didn't flinch. She looked straight at Amelia, her eyes calm, her face steady. Then, with a voice clear and soft, but sharp enough to cut through the air, she said, "Beauty doesn't need your approval." The words fell heavy, like stones dropped into silence. No one moved, no one breathed. The tension thickened, the kind that stretches seconds into minutes. Amelia's smirk faltered for a heartbeat, just a heartbeat, long enough for Maya to know she'd hit where it hurt. A judge cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Thank you, Miss Thompson," he said. "We'll be in touch." Maya nodded, picking up her shoebox with trembling hands, but there was no shame this time, just power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Outside, the sun was setting behind the city skyline, painting the sky gold, the same gold Amelia had built her empire on. But this light was different. Real. Maya walked down the steps, her shoes clicking against the stone, each step echoing like a small victory. That night she didn't dream of laughter. She dreamed of voices, real ones, whispering her name in places she'd never been before. Her hands still ached, her wallet was still thin, but her heart felt heavy in a new way. Not from shame, but from purpose. The weight of mockery had turned into the weight of proof that no matter how many people tried to silence her, she could still speak through her art. And somewhere, in her penthouse, Amelia Voss sat with a glass of wine in her hand, scrolling through her messages. Her assistant mentioned a young designer named Maya who had caught the attention of a few journalists. Amelia frowned, a trace of unease in her eyes she'd never admit to. She told herself it was nothing, just another street kid with a dream. But deep down, beneath all the gold and glass, she could still hear that sentence echoing in her mind. "Beauty doesn't need your approval." And for the first time, Amelia felt something she hadn't felt in years. A crack in her confidence. A reminder that the world she ruled so easily could one day be ruled by someone who had once stood in the corner of her studio, holding a sketchbook and wearing handmade shoes. The lights were blinding, the air thick with perfume, pride, and the hum of cameras clicking like 1,000 small explosions. It was the night of Amelia Voss's long-awaited fashion show, the one every magazine had been whispering about for months. Golden Vanity. Her empire of silk and sequins was about to shine again. She stood backstage, flawless as ever, a glass of champagne in her hand, her golden gown shimmering under the spotlight. Everything was perfect, predictable, controlled. Exactly how she liked it. Across town, Maya was slipping into a black dress borrowed from a friend, her hands trembling as she tied her hair back. She'd never been to a place like this before. The runway show wasn't hers, at least not officially. It was Amelia's world. But tonight, there was something different in the air. Tonight, the show had a new segment, the New Voices. A part of the event meant to highlight rising designers from underrepresented communities. Maya's name was one of them. Her stomach twisted as she arrived at the venue, the echoes of heels on marble growing louder as she entered. The lobby was all mirrors and gold trim, the kind of place that made you feel small even before anyone spoke. Models brushed past her in clouds of perfume and attitude, their makeup perfect, their laughter sharp. She found her spot backstage, tiny, cluttered, squeezed between racks of glittering dresses that weren't hers. Her hands brushed the shoes she'd brought, her own designs, stitched from recycled leather, hand-painted in colors that spoke of earth and struggle, not glamour. They didn't sparkle. They didn't scream for attention. They whispered. And yet something inside her knew. Tonight, they might finally be heard. The show began with thunder. Amelia's collection hit the runway like a storm, smooth, confident, expected. The audience clapped on cue, cameras flashing with mechanical precision. Models glided past in gold gowns that shimmered under perfect lighting, each step choreographed, each smile practiced. It was beautiful, yes, but it was empty, like a diamond with no soul. Amelia watched from backstage, her lips curved in satisfaction. She lived for this. The applause, the adoration, the moment she felt untouchable. Perfection, one reporter whispered nearby. Amelia smirked. Of course it was. Then the lights dimmed. The host's voice echoed through the speakers, smooth and elegant. And now, the final segment of the night, the New Voices. A hush fell over the room. This was the part most of the elite ignored, a polite gesture to diversity, nothing more. Amelia crossed her arms, uninterested. "Let's get this over with," she murmured. But when the first model stepped onto the runway wearing Maya's shoes, the room changed. The spotlight hit the design, raw, imperfect, alive. Shoes stitched from scraps of denim and worn leather, brushed with strokes of red and bronze, each mark deliberate, each flaw intentional. The audience leaned forward, curiosity sparking where boredom once sat. Then another model appeared, and another, each pair different, each pair breathing. The music shifted from classical strings to the rhythm of drums, heavy and human. The models didn't glide. They walked with purpose, shoulders back, eyes straight ahead, as if the floor itself carried their stories. You could feel it, the grit, the heart, the beauty of survival stitched into every seam. Reporters began snapping photos faster now. Whispers filled the front row. "Who is she? Where did these come from?" Amelia's posture stiffened. She tilted her head, squinting at the shoes she knew too well. Recognition flickered in her eyes, then disbelief. "No," she whispered under her breath. "It can't be her." But it was. Maya stood near the curtain, watching from the shadows. Her heart raced. Each step those models took felt like her own redemption walking out into the world. She saw the crowd's faces, awed, uncertain, alive. For the first time, they were listening. And then came the twist. The host announced a surprise guest, a celebrity, adored and untouchable, the kind of woman who could make or break a trend with a single post. The crowd buzzed with excitement as she stepped onto the stage, wearing a simple black dress and on her feet, Maya's shoes. The same design Amelia had once mocked, the same ones she'd called trash. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the audience erupted. Applause thundered through the hall. People stood. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions over the music. Who designed them? Where can we buy them? Backstage, Amelia's glass of champagne slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Her smile cracked. The color drained from her face as she watched the scene unfold. Every camera that once pointed at her now turned toward the shoes, the ones she had laughed at, the ones she had humiliated. Her assistant leaned close. "Those are Maya Thompson's designs," he whispered. Amelia didn't respond. She couldn't. She was frozen in disbelief as the world shifted before her eyes. Maya stepped out for her bow, trembling but radiant, her heart pounding louder than the applause. She wasn't supposed to be here, not on this stage, not in this world, but she was, and the cameras loved her. When the lights hit her face, she saw Amelia across the room. Their eyes met. For a second, time stopped. No laughter, no sneers, just silence. Amelia's expression broke, something fragile flickering behind her polished mask. Pride, shame, regret, maybe all three. The crowd chanted Maya's name now. Reporters surrounded her, flashes bursting like fireworks. "How does it feel?" someone asked. She smiled, her voice calm, humble. "It feels like home," she said softly, "because these shoes were made from the streets that raised me." The applause swelled again. Amelia stepped back, her empire crumbling in slow motion beneath the weight of a truth she'd never faced. Real beauty wasn't something you owned. It was something you understood. As the night went on, social media exploded. The girl who redefined beauty, the designer who made trash into art. Maya's name spread like wildfire. Her story became the story. And Amelia became a shadow in her own spotlight. She stood alone backstage long after the applause faded, watching the empty runway that used to be hers. Her reflection stared back from a darkened mirror, the golden gown looking dull now, the glamour fading. For the first time, she saw herself clearly, not as a visionary, not as a queen, but as a warning. In that silence, Amelia realized something painful and true. She wasn't the trendsetter anymore. She was the lesson. And somewhere across the city, in a small apartment filled with sketches and scraps of fabric, Maya sat by her window, holding her old shoes in her lap, the ones that started it all. She smiled softly, the sounds of the night drifting in, the hum of cars, the heartbeat of a city that had once tried to crush her. Now it whispered her name. Because when the world laughs at your beginnings, sometimes that's just the sound of destiny getting ready to clap. The crowd roared like thunder inside the glass building. Flashlights flickered. Reporters leaned forward, microphones raised. And in the middle of it all, Maya stood calm, her head slightly bowed, her hands folded over her chest, the same hands that once stitched leather in silence. The air smelled like money, perfume, and a little bit of redemption. Her shoes, those same rough, hand-stitched shoes once called ugly, were now displayed on giant screens behind her. Each pair carried a name, Soul Steps. And every single one was sold out. From a few feet away, hidden behind the velvet curtain, Amelia watched. She had come quietly, not as a guest, not as a friend, but as a ghost of her past mistakes. She remembered that day, the laughter, the whispers, the humiliation, the way she'd mocked Maya for bringing those ugly shoes into her perfect world. She remembered Maya's silence, the way her eyes didn't break, even when the room did. And now, standing there in the shadows, Amelia felt that same silence again, but this time it was directed at her. The presenter's voice echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, the woman who turned pain into purpose, Maya Thompson." The applause hit like a wave. Cameras flashed. Maya stepped forward, her stride graceful, steady, unhurried. She wore a simple white dress. No jewelry, no designer heels, just her shoes, those brown, hand-stitched leather ones that carried a story heavier than gold. She smiled, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. When she spoke, her voice was calm. "I make shoes," she said softly, "for people who walk through pain and still walk proud." The room went silent. No music, no clapping, just silence so deep it wrapped around every heart like truth itself. A line so simple, yet it struck harder than any speech. Because everyone in that room, from the billion-dollar investors to the interns standing by the walls, felt it. They had all walked through pain at some point, but not everyone had turned it into purpose. Amelia's eyes filled. She remembered the night after she'd laughed at Maya, how she'd gone home, proud of her power, her status. She told herself it was just a joke, that Maya would forget. But she didn't forget. And now, seeing her up there, Amelia realized that the woman she once looked down on had risen higher than anyone in that room. Not by fighting back, not by shouting, but by walking forward. After the cameras turned off and the crowd started leaving, Amelia found herself walking backstage. Each step felt heavier. She could hear Maya's voice somewhere down the hall, laughing gently with her small team. Not the fake laughter Amelia used to know from business meetings, but something soft, free, like someone who'd already made peace with the world. When Amelia finally saw her, Maya was sitting on a wooden stool, signing autographs. There were no bodyguards, no assistants pushing people away, just Maya smiling at everyone, thanking them. When their eyes met, Maya didn't flinch. She didn't look angry. She simply waited. "Hi," Amelia said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to say," but the words tangled in her throat. "What do you say to the person you once crushed? How do you apologize for something that shaped their strength?" Maya closed the notebook, smiled faintly, and stood. The same calmness from the stage lingered in her face. "You don't have to," she said softly. Amelia shook her head. "No, I was wrong. I shouldn't have." But Maya raised her hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "I forgave you," she said, "the day you laughed." Amelia blinked. "You what?" "I forgave you," Maya repeated, her eyes kind but firm, "because you taught me what beauty is." There was no anger in her voice, no hidden pain, just truth, the kind that doesn't scream, it just settles in your heart and stays. Amelia felt tears rise before she could stop them. "Maya, I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," Maya said, "but you did. And maybe that's what I needed, to learn how to stand without waiting for someone to see me." The silence that followed was louder than applause. It filled the space like a mirror, forcing Amelia to see herself, not as the confident executive she pretended to be, but as a woman who had used her power to hide her own insecurities. She remembered her own mother's words, how she used to say that kindness costs nothing, but arrogance can bankrupt your soul. And in that quiet backstage moment, Amelia finally understood. Maya turned slightly, picking up a small box from the table. She handed it to Amelia. Inside was a pair of shoes, handmade, brown leather, just like the ones Maya wore. "For you," Maya said, "a reminder." Amelia's fingers trembled as she touched the leather. It wasn't soft. It was rough, imperfect, but it felt alive. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Maya smiled. "No, they're honest." That word lingered. Honest, not perfect, not polished. Honest. Amelia nodded, unable to speak, her throat too tight. As Maya walked away, the echo of her steps filled the corridor, slow, certain, graceful. Amelia stood there for a long time, holding the box, feeling the weight of her own lessons pressing down. Around her, the lights dimmed and the chatter faded. Somewhere outside, people were still celebrating, but inside, Amelia felt something deeper than joy. She felt awakening. She finally understood that beauty was never about perfection. It wasn't in the shine of the leather or the labels stitched in gold. It was in the scars, the stitches, the parts that didn't hide where they'd been broken, the parts that survived. That night when Amelia got home, she took off her designer heels and placed Maya's shoes beside her bed. She sat there for a long time, just looking at them. They seemed to speak in silence, reminding her that sometimes the ugliest shoes walk the most beautiful paths. And in the quiet of her apartment, Amelia whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what grace looks like." Because grace isn't standing on top of others. It's standing after you've fallen and still choosing kindness. The next morning, Amelia walked into her office wearing those brown leather shoes. People stared, some whispered, some laughed, just like she once did, but she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to impress anyone, she was trying to understand. And as she walked down that long, shiny hallway, her footsteps echoed like a quiet confession, each one saying, "I see now." That was Maya's true victory. Not fame, not money, but transformation. The kind that doesn't just change your name, it changes hearts. Because in the end, beauty isn't polished. It's born from struggle, crafted from scars, and worn with grace. And sometimes, the ugliest shoes really do walk the most beautiful paths.